Welcome back to History Otherwise, where we explore the paths not taken in history. Usually we look the little nudges, the small ripples, but
Yeah, right.
today, today we are standing on the edge of a cliff. A cliff that Britain walked right up to in 1926, peered over the edge of, and in our timeline decided to step back from. But today, we're going to see what happens when you jump.
It is a terrifying drop to look down, isn't it? We are talking about a scenario where a labor dispute, something seemingly mundane about wages and coal, doesn't just end in a boardroom. Instead, it spirals into a civil war that wipes the United Kingdom off the map and completely rewrites the 20th century.
And this is such a huge topic, so I think to really get our heads around it, we should probably break it down a bit. First, maybe we can zoom in on the single decision, that one conversation in that one room that changed everything.
The flashpoint.
Exactly. Then we can look at the immediate violent consequences, the Civil War, the collapse of the government.
The 10 days that shook Britain.
And finally, I think we have to explore the strange new world that emerged from the ashes. A world with a socialist Britain isolated behind a watery curtain, facing off against a royalist empire running out of Canada.
It sounds like pure fiction, doesn't it? Almost like a dystopian novel.
Mm.
But the chilling part for any historian is realizing just how razor thin the margin was. This wasn't impossible, it was plausible.
So let's get our bearings first. It's May 1926. What does Britain actually feel like on the ground? Is it peaceful?
Far from it. The country is holding its breath. It's damp, it's gray, and it's angry. You have the general strike in full swing. We aren't talking about a few people picketing a library. This is 1.5 million workers.
Yeah.
Transport, heavy industry, the docks, power stations, all of them have down tools.
And this was all sparked by the coal miners, right?
Yes. The coal miners were the vanguard. They'd been locked out by the mine owners who were demanding, just brutal terms, a 13.5% wage cut and longer hours. The slogan was, not a penny off the pay, not a minute on the day. It was a siege.
So you have the workers on one side. Who's staring them down?
The conservative government. You have Prime Minister Stanley Baldwin, who, he likes to present himself as this calm, pipe-smoking conciliator. But standing right behind him is his chancellor, Winston Churchill. And Churchill is not interested in conciliation.
No.
He's a hawk. He's running the government's propaganda newspaper, the British Gazette, and he is screaming from the headlines that this strike isn't about wages. He calls it a Bolshevik plot to overthrow the state.
Which brings us to the divergence point. In, the history books, this strike ends with a bit of a whimper. The union leaders get nervous, they call it off. But let's go to May 12th, 1926. What is the decision that changes the world?
Well, in reality, the Trades Union Congress, the TUC, they accepted something called the Samuel Memorandum. It was brokered by Sir Herbert Samuel.
I've read about this memorandum. It wasn't exactly a binding contract, was it?
Not at all. Think of it like this. Imagine your boss cuts your pay, blocks you out of the office, and then says, tell you what, come back to work now, and I promise I'll think about looking into your grievances later. But I won't put it in writing.
That's a terrible deal.
It's a fig leaf. It's a way to surrender with a tiny bit of dignity. In our timeline, the TUC took it because they were terrified of the strike getting out of hand. But in this timeline, the mood in the room is different.
Who's in that room?
You have the TUC General Counsel, men like Walter Citrine, and crucially, Ernest Bevin. Bevin is a giant of the labor movement. In our history, he was a pragmatist. But in this version, something snaps. He looks at that flimsy piece of paper, he looks at the other men, and he makes a calculation based on honor, I think, rather than safety.
He decides that taking the deal would be a betrayal of the miners.
Precisely. He argues that if they walk into Downing Street with nothing but a vague promise, they're betraying 1 million starving miners. He convinces the room that solidarity has to override pragmatism. They don't buckle.
So instead of shaking hands and going back to work...
They reject the memorandum. They send an ultimatum back to Prime Minister Baldwin. We will not return to work until wages are reinstated and the mines are nationalized.
And imagine the government doesn't take that well.
It's like throwing a match into a powder keg. Baldwin's moderation just evaporates. He can't appear weak. So Churchill's hardline view becomes the only view. They stop treating this as an industrial dispute and start treating it as an insurrection. They invoke the Emergency Powers Act to its absolute limit and deploy the regular army onto the streets.
This is the shift I want to understand. How do we go from workers on strike to civil war? It just seems like such a huge leap.
It happens in the 10 days that shook Britain. It's a spiral of escalation. In our real history, the strike was famously polite. There are photos of police playing football with strikers. But here, the atmosphere turns toxic immediately. The key moment happens in Glasgow, at George Square.
Red Clydeside.
Yes. Glasgow was already a hotbed of radicalism. In this timeline, the government orders the Highland Light Infantry to clear the square of striking shipbuilders. The crowd doesn't disperse. They throw rocks. The soldiers are nervous, perhaps poorly led. An order is screamed out. Shots are fired.
And once that first shot is fired, you can't put the bullet back in the gun.
No. You have dead workers on the pavement. The news spreads via telegraph and word of mouth, getting more and more exaggerated with every mile. The army is butchering workers in Scotland.
And the strikers realize that picket signs aren't enough anymore.
Exactly. The source material describes this transformation of the councils of action. Before the shooting, these were just boring administrative bodies, guys with clipboards organizing food distribution for strikers' families. Overnight, they turn into revolutionary committees, they start seizing town halls, they start raiding armories.
The government must have tried to stop this. I mean, they have the police, the courts.
They tried, and this is where they made their fatal strategic error. On May 22nd, the government decides to cut the head off the snake. They issue arrest warrants for the entire TUC General Council. They drag Bevan and Citrine to jail.
On paper, that sounds like a logical move. Remove the leadership, confuse the movement.
It's logical if you're fighting an army. It is suicidal if you're fighting a social movement. By arresting Bevan and Citrine, the government removed the brakes. These men were actually the moderates. They were the ones holding back the tide. When you take them out of the equation, who is left to lead the strike?
The radicals. The ones who never wanted to negotiate in the first place.
The committed revolutionaries take the wheel. The guys who read Lenin and Trotsky and think, finally our time has come. The government effectively decapitated the only people they could have possibly negotiated a peace with.
So now the strike is led by people who want to overthrow the government. But the government still has the army. Surely a professional military can crush a workers' uprising.
That's the assumption. But armies are made of people. And in 1926, Britain, who are the rank-and-file soldiers?
They're working class men.
They are. They are the sons, brothers, and cousins of the people they are being ordered to shoot. And this leads to the moment the dam finally breaks. The incident at Salford.
Tell us about that day.
It's grim. Pouring rain, cobblestone slick with oil and water. The Lancashire Fusiliers are deployed to secure a railway depot that the strikers have seized. They line up, they level their rifles. Facing them isn't a faceless enemy, it's the local community. Women, old men, dockers.
And the order comes to fire.
The officer screams, "Fire!" and nothing happens. Silence. Then the rifles are lowered. The soldiers refuse. It's a mutiny.
That sends a chill down my spine. The moment the state loses its monopoly on violence, it's over, isn't it?
That is the end of the United Kingdom as we know it. The mutiny spreads like wildfire. The industrial north, Wales, Scotland, the places where the working class is strongest, they break away. They become the red heartlands. The south of England remains loyalist, but the army is fracturing. It's no longer a riot. It's a full-scale civil war.
And clearly, the Loyalists lose, because by 1927, you have this incredible image of the royal family.
The writing is on the wall. London is becoming untenable. King George V, Queen Mary, and the young princesses are rushed to Portsmouth in the dead of night. They board the battlecruiser HMS Hood,
The mightiest ship in the Navy.
and a symbol of empire. They sail out the Solent, watching the coast of England fade away, perhaps forever. They are heading to Canada to establish a government in exile. It is the symbolic death of the old Britain.
That is such a heavy image, the king running away. So the Reds win. They take London. They don't just patch up the old system, do they? They build something completely new.
They do. They declare the formation of the Union of British Socialist Republics, the UBSR.
The UBSR. It sounds so alien. How does this new state actually work? Is it just a copy of the Soviet Union?
Not exactly. It's a hybrid and a messy one. There's a massive tension at its heart. On one side, you have the syndicalists. Their view is that the trade union should run everything. So you don't vote for a member of parliament based on where you live. You vote through your workplace. The miners' union runs the energy grid. The transport union runs the trains.
So your boss or your union rep is also your government.
Effectively, yes. But then you have the centralists who are looking at Moscow and saying, no, we need a strong central party to protect the revolution. This tension never really goes away. But visually, the country is transformed.
The outline mentions what they did to the landmarks, the House of Lords.
Renamed the Museum of Feudal Oppression. They run tours through it to show children how the aristocrats used to live. Buckingham Palace becomes the People's Palace for arts and culture.
It sounds almost utopian in a way, reclaiming these spaces.
That's the propaganda reel version. The reality was much, much darker. You can't have a revolution without a counter-revolution, and the UBSR was born in blood. There was a period known as the cleansing.
Which implies exactly what I think it does.
Revolutionary terror. Landlords, aristocrats who didn't flee, business owners, even moderate socialists who weren't radical enough. Many were executed or imprisoned. It was a grim, paranoid birth for this new republic.
Let's zoom out a bit, because Britain isn't just an island. It's the center of the biggest empire the world has ever seen. If London falls to communism, what happens to the rest of the world?
The empire shatters instantly. It's a constitutional crisis that has no precedent. The Dominions, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, they look at London and say, we don't recognize those usurpers. They recognize the king in Ottawa.
So the British Empire moves its headquarters to Canada.
It becomes the Royal Commonwealth. Canada becomes a superpower overnight, the new center of the English-speaking world outside America. But the non-white colonies? That's a different story.
India, specifically.
In our history, India gains independence in 1947 after a long, long struggle. Here, the British state effectively collapses in 1926. The chain of command is broken. The British Raj is a hollow shell.
So Gandhi and Nehru don't have to wait.
They seize the moment. The Congress Party declares independence, and by 1931, the British leave. India becomes independent 16 years early. It's a massive acceleration of history.
Meanwhile, back in Europe, Britain is now what they call a pariah state.
Completely isolated. France is absolutely terrified. You have to understand the French perspective. They now have the Soviet Union to the east and the Union of British Socialist Republics to the north.
They're the meat in a communist sandwich.
Pretty much. They institute a red fear, a blockade of the channel.
And then there's Germany. The rise of Hitler. Does a communist Britain stop him?
Ironically, it helps him. It acts as an accelerant.
Yeah.
In our timeline, Hitler ranted about the Bolshevik threat, but it was distant. It was in Russia. In this timeline, he can take a telescope to the French coast, point it at the white cliffs of Dover, and say, look, the Red Plague is right there. It has swallowed Britain. Germany is the only shield left.
It validates his fear-mongering.
It creates a Red Scare on steroids. The German middle class is so terrified of ending up like the British aristocracy that they flock to the Nazis even faster.
So we still get World War II, but the teams are completely scrambled.
It's a geopolitical mess. When war breaks out in 1939, the UBSR declares revolutionary neutrality. They view the war as an imperialist squabble between the fascists in Berlin and the royalists in Ottawa. They refuse to fight.
But Hitler doesn't care about their neutrality, does he?
Not for long. After France falls, he looks across the channel. In our history, the Royal Navy stopped an invasion. But here, the Royal Navy is gone. Half of it is in Canada. The other half was scuttled or barely functional. So Operation Sea Lion, the Nazi invasion of Britain, actually happens.
That is a nightmare scenario. Nazis on British soil.
It leads to a brutal occupation. But then you have the entry of the United States. And this is where it gets really weird. The U.S. is allies with the Royal Commonwealth in Canada.
Yeah.
They want to liberate Britain, but they hate the British communists.
So they're fighting the same enemy, but they aren't friends.
They don't even talk. The U.S. sends Lend-Lease aid to Ottawa, and they send it to Stalin in Russia, but they send nothing to the UBSR.
So you have the British Red Army fighting a guerrilla war in the hedgerows of England with Molotov cocktails, while the Americans and Canadians are building up a massive invasion force across the Atlantic.
Which leads to the concept of two D-Days. The Commonwealth and American forces land in Normandy to liberate Europe. At the same time, the British Red Army pushes the Nazis out of Britain and crosses the Channel to liberate the Pas-de-Calais.
So the war ends not with a handshake, but with a standoff. American tanks staring down British Red Army tanks somewhere in northern France.
A divided France.
Yeah.
A divided Europe. The Cold War starts immediately, and it is much, much hotter.
I want to fast forward to the modern day, the 21st century, because the most fascinating part of this deep dive for me was the description of the two Britons. What does life look like in the UBSR versus the Commonwealth realm?
It's a study in contrasts. Let's start with the UBSR Britain 1. It became Fortress Britain because the isolation, the blockade, the paranoia, it just turned inward.
The notes mention the beacon car.
Yes, the beacon. It's the UBSR's answer to the Trabant, a plastic, unreliable car that you have to wait 10 years on a list to buy. The economy is gray. Rationing never really ended because they've been under siege for 80 years.
And the culture, I'm trying to imagine 1960s London without the swinging 60s.
It doesn't exist. No Beatles, no Rolling Stones.
Mm-hmm.
Rock and roll is suppressed as capitalist decadence. The culture is focused on heavy industry, folk songs, revolutionary poetry. It's a very serious, stoic, gray place.
Now contrast that with the Royal Commonwealth based in Ottawa.
It's the opposite. It's hyper-capitalist, dynamic, and aggressively multicultural. It's a superpower. And curiously, it became the custodian of fun British culture.
I love the detail about the football leagues.
The Exile League. Manchester United and Arsenal aren't playing in Manchester or London. Those clubs were banned by the Socialists as bourgeois businesses. The clubs moved. So you have Arsenal playing in Toronto, Manchester United playing in Vancouver. It's a global league.
And the Rolling Stones?
Mick Jagger and Keith Richards' parents emigrated to Canada in the 40s. The band formed in Kingston, Ontario. They're considered the greatest Canadian rock band of all time.
It's heartbreaking in a way the English Channel became watery curtain.
Exactly like the Berlin Wall. Families were cut in half. You have people in Dover looking at old photos of cousins in Toronto who they haven't seen in 3 generations. 2 versions of Britishness evolving completely separately. One trapped in 1926 revolutionary fervor, the other mutating into this North American hybrid.
It brings us to the end and to a really difficult philosophical question. In our real history, the TUC calling off the strike is often called the Great Betrayal. They left the miners to rot. It was a defeat for the working class.
It was. It was messy, it was unequal, and the miners suffered terribly for years afterwards. It is a scar on British labor history.
But when you look at the Red Island timeline,
You have to ask yourself, was that betrayal actually a mercy? Was it their greatest service?
because the alternative wasn't a worker's paradise.
No. The alternative was civil war, families killing families over the dinner table, a totalitarian state, and a century of isolation.
It makes you realize that sometimes the boring, disappointing, compromising outcome, the one that feels like a defeat at the time, is actually the thing that saves you.
The stability of history is fragile. We often wish for radical change, but we rarely calculate the cost of the chaos that comes with it. The path not taken is often not taken for a very good reason.
That is a lot to chew on. A world without the Beatles, but with a king in Ottawa and a Red Army in London. Thank you for taking this jump with us today.
My pleasure. It's a terrifying view, but a necessary one.
And to our listener, thanks for tuning in. Keep asking those what-if questions, because history might have turned otherwise.